Welcome to the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast, the show where brilliant professionals share how to sharpen the universal skills required to flourish at work. Enjoy more career fun, wins, meaning, and money with your host, Pete Makaitis.
Hello, and thanks for joining us here for episode 888 with Dr. Nate Regier. Nate is back because Nate's got more great stuff. We're talking about how you can get results, holding people accountable without damaging relationships. Great stuff. You'll learn 1, the 3 switches for greater compassion every day. 2, a handy template for dealing with any conflict. And 3, why lowering standards doesn't actually help folks who are struggling. So if you want to check out the show notes or the transcript or the links to items that we've mentioned here, please visit us over at awesomeatyourjob.com/EP888. Now here's a bit about Nate. Nate Regier, PhD, is the CEO and founding partner of Next Element Consulting, a global leadership consulting and training firm helping build cultures of compassionate accountability. Dr. Regier is a former practicing psychologist and expert in social emotional intelligence, interpersonal communication, conflict skills, and leadership. Recognized as a top 100 keynote speaker, he is a process communication model certifying master trainer. He's the author of 4 books, Beyond Drama, Conflict Without Casualties, Seeing People Through, and his newest book, Compassionate Accountability. He hosts a podcast called On Compassion with Dr. Nate, writes a weekly blog, and contributes to multiple industry publications and is a regular guest on podcasts. Fun note, this is maybe the first time it's happened in 888 episodes. We have 2 guests back-to-back, Mark Lesser in 887 and Nate Regier here in 888, who are both talking about compassionate accountability. And it's funny how it just worked out that way with scheduling. But I'd love to get your take, dear listener. Do you enjoy hearing 2 people back to back talking about a similar thing with a different slant angle, freshness to deepen and enrich the topic? Or do you prefer variety? Mix it up, episode to episode to episode. Let me know. Email pete@awesomeatyourjob.com. It'd be fun to hear from you. Big thanks to Nate for sharing his wisdom with us. And big thanks to our sponsors. Check them out. And big thanks to our sponsor, Acorns. Acorns makes it easy to start automatically saving and investing for your future. You don't need a lot of money or expertise to invest with Acorns. In fact, you can get started with just your spare change. Acorns recommends an expert-built portfolio that fits you and your money goals, then automatically invests your money for you. NerdWallet.com, whom I love on these sorts of matters, gives Acorns a whopping 4.7 stars and says, quote, if you want to make the most of your spare change, there's no better place to do that than Acorns. Head to acorns.com/awesome or download the Acorns app to start saving and investing for your future today. And we got a legal disclaimer here. It may not be representative of all clients. Tier 1 compensation provided. Compensation provides an incentive to positively promote Acorns. View important disclosures at acorns.com/awesome. Investing involves risk, including the loss of principal. Please consider your objectives, risk tolerance, and Acorns' fees before investing. Acorns Advisors LLC, Acorns, is an SEC-registered investment advisor. Brokerage services are provided to clients of Acorns by Acorns Securities LLC, member FINRA/SIPC. For more information, visit acorns.com. One sponsor to check out is Storyworth. Whenever I'm thinking about meaningful Father's Day gifts, Storyworth leaps to mind. Storyworth helps you preserve precious memories and stories from your father for years to come. Each week, Storyworth emails your loved ones a thought-provoking question that you get to help pick, such as, what's the bravest thing you've ever done? I personally love the prompt so much that I have refreshed Storyworth's questions page many times looking for more. Storyworth makes the writing process super quick and easy. All your loved one needs to do is respond to that email with a story, and then you get a quick copy of that. And after a year of this fun, Storyworth compiles your loved one's stories and photos into a beautiful keepsake hardcover book that you'll be able to share and revisit for generations to come. Families love Storyworth so much, they've got 25,000 5-star reviews on Trustpilot and have millions of stories preserved. So give all the fathers in your life a unique, heartfelt gift they'll all cherish for years. Storyworth. Right now, you can save $10 on your first purchase when you go to storyworth.com/awesome. That's storyworth.com/awesome to save $10 on your first purchase. One sponsor to check out is Harvard Business Review. This brilliant magazine, published at hbr.org, is the leading destination for smart management thinking. Fun fact, HBR has been mentioned in 108 episodes of the show. That's because HBR has great stuff that comes up often. They've got explainer videos, podcasts, real-world case studies, and much more. I think of HBR each night that I put on my special orange glasses. Their article, Will Blue Light Glasses Improve Your Sleep?, revealed that those who wore them reported better sleep and a 7% improvement in work performance as compared to those who wore the sham glasses. So I cite HBR anytime anyone tells me that I look silly wearing them. Now, much of HBR's content is available for free when you sign up at their site. Subscriptions that get you unlimited content cost $10 a month. If you visit hbr.org/subscriptions and enter the promo code AWESOME, you can save 10% off of that subscription. Again, to save 10% off of your HBR subscription, go to www.hbr.org/subscriptions and enter the promo code AWESOME. Now, here's Nate. Nate, welcome back to How to Be Awesome at Your Job.
Pete, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Well, I'm so excited to get into some fresh wisdom from your latest book, Compassionate Accountability, How Leaders Build Connection and Get Results. But first, I think we need an update on the barbecuing situation. Are you still competing? Where does that stand?
Well, that's a good question. I got some good news and I got some kind of sad news.
Okay.
Yeah, the competing continued. And in fact, I've taken on helping organize a local barbecue competition in my own community as part of a festival. So we're doing that. But sadly, the team that I talked about last time, we're kind of on a hiatus because...
Oh, the butts.
Yeah, my brother-in-law and the pit boss and the main organizer and the impetus behind it all, he passed away from cancer last year.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you. So we are barbecue in his memory these days, but not quite the same level of competition.
Understood. Well, I'm glad to hear you're continuing to stay involved and good things are happening in the community and with barbecue. And I was recently on a camping expedition and someone brought their smoker with them. And it was, it wasn't backpacking. It was, that would be a whole nother level of commitment.
Yeah. They make little tabletop ones, but man.
And yes, it was exceptional. So tell me, any best practices for meat that you think normal folks who are not 100% committed at competition level should know about?
Man, I tell you, I am such a fan of the big green egg, and you can get them almost anywhere now. And it's just really hard to mess anything up in those things.
Okay.
And they even make little tiny ones. So that's what I'd recommend if anybody wants to get started in the smoking business.
Okay. Now we know. We've put it on the record. All right. Now let's talk about the book here. Any particularly surprising or counterintuitive or striking discoveries you've made about accountability as you did your research for your book, Compassionate Accountability?
Yeah, a couple actually. This whole notion that accountability is not contrary to compassion and is not in competition with compassion is really the biggest thing that we've been discovering, and that people really seem to think that they're different. And that when push comes to shove, most people will choose one or the other, thinking that they're somehow opposite. And it's just an interesting phenomenon. And leaders struggle like crazy with that dilemma.
How would you articulate the perceived disconnect?
The word accountability is really loaded. This whole idea of we need to hold people accountable, or, they need to be held accountable for their actions. It's a huge word. It has somewhere, I think people mean something like owning up, or maybe being punished, or maybe having consequences, or somehow need to have it pinned on somebody. And so the word has really negative connotations. It's loaded. And so it's kind of like a hot potato. Yet in leadership, as in most relationships, accountability is incredibly important for trust, for consistency, for integrity. And yet we don't see a lot of people that are comfortable doing that in a way that preserves dignity, that preserves relationships. It isn't kind of a gotcha kind of a mentality. And so that's where we're kind of at that nexus between those two.
You're right. The word accountability often shows up in criminal, like law and order proceedings. We need to hold them accountable, which is a very different vibe. We're going to collect evidence and prosecute this person and send them to prison. Then, oh, hey, you didn't quite do some of the things you committed to doing earlier in the workplace. Very different charge. And yet the same word pops up there.
Well, the way you just said it invites me to clarify something that I should have said earlier, which is accountability isn't something we do to people.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems like kind of the way you and I described it. It's like, oh, we got to go do this to them, make sure they own up and pay. Accountability truly is something we do with people. So it's really a process that happens within relationships. And so often accountability in today's world seems to be such an adversarial kind of a thing.
That's a good one. Thank you. So it's collaborative process.
Yeah. Not
so much a intense, I'm doing this to you. I'm inflicting accountability upon you.
You're going to pay.
No, right. Lovely. Well, so before we dig into some of the details, I'd love it if you could get us fired up by sharing an inspiring story of someone who adopted some of your compassion and accountability perspectives to see some awesome results.
Yeah, I tell you one. I'm not going to name names because we're kind of right in the middle of an engagement with this organization, but the president shared with me the other day on one of our leadership team consulting sessions. She said, man, she goes, this template you've developed for compassion accountability, it's no joke. She said, I kind of was like, yeah, I'll try it. She goes, I used it with my kids and it's magical. I couldn't believe how we just resolved this situation. And she goes, and so then I started using it with my employees and it just works. And she goes, I never really conceptualized that you could build a relationship at the same time that you're trying to pursue accountability. And it's really pretty cool. She said, I'm enjoying what it's doing with my relationships.
Well, Nate, we're going to have to immediately go to that. Tell us about this magical template. What is it? Where can we get it? How does it work?
Well, we've been teaching a process for engaging healthy conflict. I think I visited with you on the last time, but we're really trying to make it simpler and simpler and simpler. And what we've identified is what we call the 3 switches of the compassion mindset. And it's a way of thinking about ourselves and others that embodies the fullest intention, the fullest meaning of compassion. Compassion, which means to struggle with. Remember, we talked about it's a collaborative effort. These are hard things.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've identified these 3 switches that we call value, capability, and responsibility. And we can give people some basic kind of guardrails and guidelines to say, are you keeping your switches on? And if you have all 3 switches on when you're engaging with somebody, you can really have pretty transformative conversations. And if you need more help, then we can get down into the nitty gritty about some of the templates and formulas for how to actually do that.
Okay, the 3 switches: value, capability, and what?
And responsibility.
And responsibility. So then what do we mean exactly by having these switches on versus off? Could you maybe give us a demonstration of what that sounds and feels like in practice?
You bet. So the metaphor switches we chose carefully because I'm right here. I'm actually holding, you can see this. I'm holding some switches.
Well, there you go.
And we have them in our house. Imagine a 3-switch wall plate on your house. Each one runs a different light or a different appliance or whatever. And behind all these switches is this incredible amount of energy, electricity, just waiting to be used. And when you turn on that switch, you complete the circuit and you intentionally free that energy to go do its job. And so each of these switches is an intentional choice we make on how we're going to spend energy in order to light up the world. And each one of these switches, the switch of value, is powered by this fundamental belief that human beings are unconditionally worthwhile. We are valuable because we're human, not because of anything we do or say, and nothing can diminish our innate human value. And so that invites and implies certain behaviors. Same is true for the capability switch, which is powered by let me just stop there. So anything you want to know more about there, about this whole metaphor of the switches?
Oh, that's cool. I dig it in terms of we flip it on or off and the electron can flow to light up something when we've got it on versus it can't if it's interrupted. So understood there. And then when it comes to value, yes, I think that's fantastic as just sort of a fundamental reorientation reminder, maybe for every day and every human interaction, that human beings have unconditional dignity just cause.
Just cause.
Not because they perform well or poorly, but just intrinsic to their humanity. And that can, whether you draw that from a religion or wisdom tradition or the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, like, I think that is a foundational notion that is just great for all mankind to get down with it, to recall.
And Pete, it doesn't mean that anything goes. Saying that you are unconditionally worthwhile as a human doesn't mean you can do whatever you want, because the person and the behavior are 2 very different things. Mm-hmm. And this is where we really start to talk about what accountability means. Because if I treat you as unconditionally worthwhile, what that means is I take seriously your humanity. I take seriously your emotions, your experiences, the way you see the world, your differences. Your innate differences are a beautiful part of who you are. And so I see that for what it is and I don't judge it. But that's very different than behaviors, performance, goals, those kinds of things. And those are addressed in the other 2 switches.
All right, gotcha. So let's talk about capability.
So capability is the next switch. So if we turn on the switch of value, it's like, hey, look, I am worthwhile. You're worthwhile. Nothing we could do or say is going to change that. So let's level the playing field on our humanity. Then capability is powered by the fundamental belief that anyone can contribute under the right conditions. Now, that's kind of loaded. Anyone can contribute, meaning everyone and anyone can and should be part of the solutions in their lives, should be agentic beings participating in their own future, in the solving the problems that they're dealing with, and that everyone has a capability of doing that. So that means we look for gifts. We try to apply strengths. We teach people things. We mentor. We get curious. We learn and grow. And when we fail, we pick ourselves up and say, what can we learn? Instead of saying, well, see, I knew you couldn't do it anyways, which is a great thing you would say if your switch was off. So capability is about nurturing capacity because people are capable and looking and finding ways that they can be part of the solution.
Okay. And responsibility?
Responsibility now, if human beings are valuable and they're capable, then they are also responsible, meaning that we make choices and we live in communities where our behaviors matter. And so the switch of responsibility is powered by the fundamental belief that every one of us is 100% responsible for our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors, no less and no more. So what that means is no matter what happened before, I am 100% responsible for what I do next.
Okay. So then when we talk about the switches being off or on, what does that mean on a daily basis? Because in some ways, these are sort of beliefs or assertions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I can imagine they say, yeah, I believe those three things. So I guess my switches are on.
Yeah. So let's talk about specific behaviors. So let's say I claim that my switch of value is on.
Mm-hmm.
And Pete, you come to me in a moment of darkness and a moment of struggle, and you're my peer, and you say to me, God, Nate, I just don't know if I feel comfortable sharing this with you, but I'm just really feeling uncertain about this task that's been put before me. I don't know if I can pull it off. And I would hate to be embarrassed in front of my boss. You share something really vulnerable that's just kind of about what you're struggling with, right? How I respond in that moment will let you know if my switch of value is on or off. Am I going to see you as less than because of what you've shared? By saying something like, dude, suck it up, right? Which means I completely discounted your struggle. Or am I going to say something like, Pete, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm really touched that you trusted me. I see you. Or maybe with my switch of value off, I would say something like, well, everybody feels like that at first. You'll get over it. Like I just kind of say like your feelings aren't that serious. And I'm not taking seriously your experience. Or I could turn my switch on and empathize and say, man, I remember what it was like being new in my job. It sucks. I'm here for you, man. You feel the difference between those two ways of responding when you kind of showed me your humanity?
I do, yes. And so then I guess if someone does give a suboptimal response like, oh, suck it up, it's part of the job, deal with it, I could see how that's inconsiderate, invalidating. Although I'm not sure if I see how that is saying you do not have dignity or you do not have value as a person. It kind of says, I don't care about your experience, I guess. So if we bundle the human experience within the human person, fundamentally, we're getting real philosophical here, Nate.
Well, no, you're getting at something really deep and it's really important, but I'll let you finish.
So yeah, I guess that's what I'm thinking about in terms of distinguishing or uniting these concepts.
Right.
Help me out here a little bit.
So when I say suck it up, or I say, oh, you don't need to feel that way, what I'm doing is I'm saying that I'm not comfortable with the way you're feeling and I want to change it.
Yeah.
I want it to be different than it is. You didn't ask me for that. You didn't say you wanted to feel different. I am now judging the value of your feelings and trying to change them or fix them. Good or bad.
Okay. Value of feelings.
Right. When I say suck it up, I'm basically saying, look, I'm uncomfortable with this. You need to change how you're feeling in order to be okay for me. Like somehow your worth is now conditional on you being tough or being non-emotional. Or let's say I just shut down. You share something with me. I'm like, look, I can't handle this. I don't got the bandwidth. Like, don't bring your crap to me. What I'm saying is I can't handle your feelings, which means they're too hot for me. I'm not comfortable, which means I don't see them. I don't want to see them. Like, keep them out of my sight. And those send really important messages about who's okay and under what conditions that really contributes to psychological safety.
All right. So then the value is perhaps broader than simply the human being's intrinsic dignity and value and worth, but rather the entirety of their human experience. You are acknowledging the value therein and appreciating it and not rejecting it.
Yeah, definitely. Well said. And, some of the traditions like the self-compassion, mindfulness, meditation kind of practices, they really try to be able to experience things without judging. They call it a non-judgmental observation, non-judgmental presence. That's cultivating this capacity to see myself as worthwhile, independent of what I'm experiencing, and see my experiences as really useful teaching tools that are part of who I am, but they're not good or bad.
Well, so now let's hear about responsibility.
If we want to talk about like specific behaviors, can we take your scenario and take that through the switches?
Okay, sure thing.
Because let's say you come to me with that and I'm like, oh man, that sucks. I remember that. Well, you're still an employee. You still have responsibilities. Just because you're anxious and not feeling good doesn't mean you get a free ride today, right? Just because I care about you doesn't mean that you're off the hook. So the capability switch now starts to get curious about, so what are the resources at our disposal to help deal with this? So I might say things like, what have you tried? Or I'd love to learn a little bit more about what's going on with you. Or what are you struggling with? Or how can I help you? So now we're starting to get kind of dynamically engaged in problem solving. And I'm kind of owning that you're capable of dealing with this situation that you're in. I don't have to fix it for you, but I'm certainly happy to be helpful if you want. But then at the end of the day, to your responsibility switch now, the reality is you still have to get your work done no matter how you're feeling today. And so the responsibility switch sounds something like, okay, so our deadline is still Friday. How you feeling about getting that done on time? Or how can I support you in meeting the deadline under these conditions? Or can I still count on you in having it done?
Understood. And so then the switches, they really do seem to want to go in that order.
Yeah.
In terms of value first, then capability, then responsibility. Because if you jump right into responsibility, that's not feeling great on the other side of that.
No, it's not feeling good. And if you want to know what that feels like, talk to any of my daughters about their sports coaches.
Okay.
That's pretty much where they like to hang out is here's what you got to do. Here's the goals. Here's what you're doing wrong. You're breaking the rules. That's all they ever do. But they never acknowledge the value of the players and they never acknowledge the capability of the players.
All right. Well, that was a useful example. I'd love it if maybe we could role play some more. Let's just say that someone doesn't even come forward to you in the first place. Like you discover it. Like, wait a second, this thing is not done or has lots of mistakes. Now I got to have this conversation.
Wow. So now I'm Pete's boss and Pete hasn't told me anything's wrong, but
No.
I've discovered he's behind
Mm-hmm.
and I'm his boss. So it reflects on me. I'm accountable to my peers for your performance, even though I'm not the one that's supposed to do it. And if you don't get the stuff done on time, it kind of lets the whole team down. All right.
Yeah.
So now I'm the one having the difficult experience. I'm the one that just noticed something. Maybe I'm surprised. Maybe I'm anxious. Maybe I'm angry at you. Maybe I'm like confused. Like, how come I didn't know? So if I'm going to turn my switch of value on for myself, what I have to say is this experience is relevant. I have to pay attention to it. I got to own it. I got to do something about this. So I would probably come to you and I would turn on my switch and say, hey, here's what I'm experiencing. I just kind of let you know that I'm kind of anxious about something or I'm kind of shocked about what I just found out yesterday. And I want you to know. Well, then I have to go to the capability switch and say, because I'm also capable of handling my feelings and solving my own problems. So what does that mean? Well, maybe I need to start asking some questions. Maybe I need to get curious with you and say, hey, can I check an assumption with you? Or I want to tell you what I saw and see if you can shed light on this, or what do you know about what happened? So I'm getting curious and we're learning about it. But if my switch of responsibility is on, what I also have to realize is at the end of the day, I'm ultimately accountable to my team. I'm ultimately responsible for my feelings and I have to be a leader. So I need to do what I need to do to get this corrected. doesn't mean doing your job for you, but it means having the hard conversation, realigning priorities, figuring out what needs to happen, getting new commitments from you, removing barriers, whatever I need to do so that you can get that job done. Or maybe I learned something when I'm curious that I had no idea and I have to completely change my frame of mind. Maybe it wasn't you. Who knows?
Okay. And could you give us some examples of actual verbiage you might use?
Yeah. I might come to you and I might say, hey, I'm really anxious about something I just found out the other day, and I want to tell you about it. Here's what happened. So I was going through the reports and I noticed for 3 consecutive weeks, you've missed the numbers by 20%. The reason I'm concerned is because here's what this means. So I'm just curious if you could shed light on this, let me know what I need to know, because at the end of the day, this puts you in the 50th percentile, and you got to be in the 70th in order to continue to get, your performance raises.
Okay. Understood. And then we just sort of see what happens.
We see where it goes, and we never know. As long as my switches are on, I can keep mobilizing responses that affirm your value, your capability, and your responsibility.
Okay. Well, so tell us a little bit more about the compassion side of this in terms of what are some of the do's and don'ts for ensuring that the compassion part comes through?
Well, the good news is turning on the switches is how we manifest full compassion, because our definition of compassion is it's the practice of demonstrating that people are valuable, capable, and responsible in every interaction. So we have to demonstrate this through our behaviors. And so the compassion part means keeping our switch on and open by affirming your value, keeping our switch on and capability by affirming your capability, and also by taking ownership over our stuff and letting you do the same at responsibility. In my book, I give a lot of examples of narratives and what you actually say and how you address these situations. But that is the compassion part, is making sure our switches are on.
Okay. Well, and you say people are, these things. And I'm curious, what if folks are not? Like folks are just not taking responsibility for their stuff?
Well, they are responsible for their behavior, whether they want to own it or not.
Okay.
By function of your job, you are responsible to get that stuff done. Now, whether you do or not, you might be shirking your responsibility, but it's still your job and it's still your thing to do. And so that's the conversation we have about that.
Okay. And so your client who mentioned that this template is magical, what unfolds on the template?
So the template is something we teach in our leadership trainings. It's called ORPO, and it stands for Open, Resourceful, Persistent, Open. And ORPO is a 4-step process where when there's conflict, when there's a tough situation, where there's a gap and we got to talk about it, we go in first being open, which means touch the humanity, kind of like I did. I came in and I said, hey, I'm really struggling with something here. I want to check it out with you. Then we go to resourceful, which is where we get to being curious about what's going on. Let's understand the problem. Then we go to persistent and we get crystal clear about what's at stake. What are the boundaries? What are the non-negotiables? And then we circle back to open and finish back at a human connection point. So I might really shorten that example I gave earlier. I was using that template where I said, hey, Pete, I'm concerned about something. I want to share it with you. That's open. Here's what happened. And I'm curious about how you saw it. Resourceful. At the end of the day, we still have to have this in by Friday. That's the persistent part. Then I might finish by saying, how are you doing with this?
Okay. Understood. And then any particular verbiage, thoughts, things to say, things to not say when we're doing this stuff?
What we see is most challenging for people is to get vulnerable by letting people know how they're actually doing, how they're actually feeling. And people have all kinds of reasons that they don't want to. And I'm going to be judged. They're not going to take me seriously. No one's ever been through this before. I don't want to burden you with my stuff. And so that's one of the hardest things. And so if I could say anything, I would say, look, don't share it because you know the other person's going to take you seriously. Share it because you matter and because it's on your heart. And you got to take ownership for yourself and share that stuff, because that's the only way you can start working with other people and struggling with other people to start doing something about it.
And so what are some examples of the stuff that gets not shared, withheld often?
Putting a lot of pressure on myself to deliver because I need to impress people, maybe, for example, which is legitimate. Why don't we talk about it? Needing to please people, trying to be perfect in order to somehow be okay, and then just getting yourself tied up in knots because it's never good enough. So when we talk about those things, we can get reality checks, we can get support, we can get people in there with us, helping us figure it out.
Okay. And then I'm curious, how often do folks abuse our compassion or kindness?
I've never heard that question before, and I love it. So I'm going to take a beat here. I don't know that anyone has the power to abuse my compassion. I would never give that to them. I can choose to be compassionate. I can choose to have my switches on, and they can choose what they are going to do. They may not accept the invitation. They may do their own thing, but my compassion stays my compassion. They can't change it.
Okay. Maybe I am commingling some ideas inappropriately. I suppose I'm thinking about compassion in the sense of if there is, maybe you might call it lenience or mercy in a certain context, like, hey, I understand that some stuff came up and you couldn't get it done on time. Let's revise the deadline and make it this. And then that's sort of taken advantage of in terms of, so this guy's a softie. I can walk all over him. I can make excuses.
Well, if I did that, I would only have one or two of my switches on.
Yeah, I hear you.
So that wouldn't really be compassion. So if I'm not holding firm to boundaries or being reasonable, and if I'm not upholding the highest standards throughout, then I'm not doing my job, and that's not compassionate. So I wouldn't say that that's a person abusing my compassion. That would be me not really being compassionate in the first place.
I see.
And sending the message that somehow because you're struggling, then the standards are lower for you. Why would we treat someone as less capable of meeting the goals just because they're struggling? I would say we'd come around them and work with them to meet the standards. Now, yeah, there's always opportunities where I might say, wow, this is a pretty extenuating circumstance. Look, my partner got all his flights delayed and his family ended up in a hotel, didn't get home till 4 a.m. in the morning. And we had a 9 o'clock meeting that day. And I was like, dude, let's cancel the meeting, right? Let's reschedule the meeting. But am I just giving him a break for? No. I mean, that's kind of a one-time thing. We work it out. We still have to get it done by the end of the week. But I guess you have to keep all three switches on or there's no compassion, really.
Now, I think that feels fresh in terms of looking at your being, in your worldview, you are not being compassionate if you allow someone to lower their standards.
Yes, I am. I agree with you because what I'm saying is I don't believe you're as capable. I'm lowering my estimation of their capability, but I'm also shirking my responsibility to uphold the standards of the contract, of the family, of the company at the same time. Mm-hmm. So I'm letting my team down when I do that.
And what happens if we discover that, hey, sure enough, someone really is not capable of executing to these standards after all?
The fundamental belief behind the capability switch is everyone is capable of contributing. That may not be in this job. It may not be today, and it may not be with this skill set. And so what that means is we invest in them. We invite them to stretch. We are alongside them when they fail, and we don't set them up to not be able to do stuff. It may be a different position, a new training, might even be letting them go because this job is asking things of them that just set them up to fail. But that's really not an indictment of their capability. It's an indictment of their competence. And it's commenting more on their skill set and competence for this job. So we look for places where they can thrive.
Gotcha. So they're certainly capable of making a contribution. However, it may be that the particular responsibilities of a role are poorly suited to them, and thusly they would be doing some bigger contributions in a different context.
Yeah, I think sometimes we let people down because we either don't equip them with the skills and training to do the job, so they fail, or we just move them around in an organization hoping something will work. And by doing that, we tell them we really don't care about them as a human being anyways. And in both of those situations, the end result is the switches of capability and responsibility get turned off.
All right. Well, Nate, tell me anything else you want to make sure to mention before we shift gears and hear about some of your favorite things.
Well, coming through COVID, I'll tell you what, compassion and accountability were on a wild roller coaster ride through the last 3 or 4 years. Which one are we going to pick? And one day we're all in this together because everybody has COVID. The next day we're all trying to hold each other accountable for who's wearing a mask or who's not getting a vaccine. So I think what this has proven is you can't treat these two things in isolation. They have to come together. Never before in our history have we needed both in full measure together to deal with the kind of stuff that we're having to deal with. So that might be my last thing I really want to emphasize.
All right. Well, now could you share a favorite quote, something you find inspiring?
I've loved this quote. This has been my favorite for years. And it's a quote by Wayne Dyer. I used to think Albert Einstein said it, but it's actually from Wayne Dyer. And it says, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
Mm-hmm. And a favorite study or experiment or bit of research?
I'm a real fan of the research that's reported in the book Compassionomics. It's a wonderful book about the power of compassion in the workplace. And there's some research, neurobiological research on brain scans showing that when people are experiencing empathy, the pain centers of the brain are triggered. But when people are experiencing compassion, the reward centers of the brain are triggered. And that is critical. Different places in the brain, different things. And it shows you that compassion and empathy are not the same thing. And that compassion is actually energizing and intrinsically rewarding.
Well, that is intriguing. Well, now could you expand upon the distinction between compassion and empathy?
Yeah. Empathy is a really important human trait where mirror neurons in our brain, they kind of sense how other people are doing and they replicate those senses in us. And it's really important for humans that we can kind of sense how people are doing so we can support them. But also left unchecked, empathy becomes, we just take on pain and it just like fills us up. And this leads to what we call, it's misnamed compassion fatigue, but it's really empathy fatigue and burnout and depersonalization. But compassion, in the way that I've been demonstrating it throughout our conversation, that's a dynamic, active, generative, creative process. It's hard work, but the results are great. And I feel so good afterwards.
Okay. Thank you. And a favorite book?
Right now, I can't get enough of Brene Brown's book called The Atlas of the Heart. It's a really cool book. And for kind of technical people like you and I, we like to see things organized. It organizes the whole gamut of human emotions and gives you the history of it, how it came to be, why that emotion is unique from other emotions, how to talk about it, how to express it. It's amazing. It's really helping me improve my emotional fluency. And I'd recommend this book to anybody who wants to get more compassionate.
Okay. And a favorite tool, something you used to be awesome at your job?
I can't mention my favorite cordless drill.
You can.
I am awesome at woodworking with my favorite cordless drill, but at my job, I love Calendly. I love that app for scheduling, and it's just awesome. It makes it so much easier for people to find a place on my calendar, and it takes care of the business. It was so cool that someone that just learned it the other day called it Calendar Lily. And I'm thinking, that's kind of cool. It's a calendar lily.
It is. It's like a refreshing flower in
I know, right?
In a landscape of weeds.
Makes my life easier for sure.
And a favorite habit?
I stretch every morning. I've been doing it for about 35 years. I have a routine series of stretches. It keeps me kind of limber. And then I love to go on walks with my dog and with my wife, or both of them at the same time. It's a wonderful time to process or clear my mind, and I need the exercise.
All right. And is there a key nugget you share that really seems to connect and resonate with folks? They quote it back to you often?
One of my favorites, it's not so much related to compassion, but we do a lot of work with personality, diversity, and communication. And I like to say that personality is not an entitlement program. And people seem to like that.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if they've been burned by being trained in a personality model that puts them in a box and stereotypes them, and people are throwing labels around and all that stuff.
Okay. And if folks want to learn more or get in touch, where would you point them?
I'd just say LinkedIn. Look me up on LinkedIn, Nate Regier, and that'll take you anywhere you need to go.
And do you have a final challenge or call to action for folks looking to be awesome at their jobs?
Yeah. I started using the hashtag compassionate accountability about 18 months ago. And if you go use that hashtag, you can find so many nuggets, daily tips, little things to be awesome at your job, to practice more compassionate accountability. So yeah, just search hashtag compassionate accountability and see if something doesn't pop up that you can use today.
All right. And Nate, thank you. This has been a treat. I wish you much luck and much compassionate accountability.
Well, thank you. It's our mission. I appreciate this opportunity to be with you and your guests.
I really love Nate's point associated with the fundamental unconditional dignity of people. And it's easy in the heat of things to kind of forget about that. Either yourself, thinking your value is contingent upon what you're outputting and how much you're achieving and how awesome you're being, or others. And those three switches really great in terms of the value, the capability, the responsibility. When these are on, yeah, compassion does tend to flow all the better. Good reminders from Nate. Again, the show notes, the transcript, and the links to items we've referenced are at awesomeatyourjob.com/EP888. Hope to catch you next time. And peace.
Thanks for listening. To get the most out of the show, we recommend 2 key things. First, check out the extra resources at awesomeatyourjob.com. You can find this episode's transcript and links, as well as the perfect episode for your situation. You can search the full-text transcripts of hundreds of episodes or explore episodes tagged by topic and competency covered. Second, subscribe to the podcast and get future episodes automatically. You can subscribe by telling Siri and several other smartphones and speakers, subscribe to the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast, or by tapping subscribe in your podcast player of choice. If you'd like some extra help figuring out podcasts and how subscriptions work, visit awesomeatyourjob.com/subscribe for guidance. Hope to catch you on the next episode of How to Be Awesome at Your Job.
1, 2, 3, 4. Those are numbers, but you already knew that. If you want to know what number you're going to pay each month for your car, use Kelley Blue Book My Wallet on Auto Trader. They're really good at numbers. Auto Trader.